Hello everyone, today we'll continue with the same Act 1, Scene 1. I want you all to open page 26. We'll start with the speech of Celerino. Right, it is line number 23. It says here, my wind cooling my broth. So here Celerino is talking about the first danger that the ships could actually face. Number one is wind. He's comparing this wind to his breath. He says here, when I use my wind, I use my breath to cool my soup, it gives me fever when I think of the wind at sea. Right? He says here, my wind cooling my broth. Broth is the soup, would blow me to an ague, means it will actually give me fever when I thought what harm a wind too great at sea might do, when I think what harm this wind could actually do at sea. First example. Second, I should not see the sandy hourglass run, but I should think of shallows and of flats. So he says here, and I avoid looking at the sandy hourglass. That too running. Sandy hourglass is a hourglass that the people they used to use to watch or to know the time, right? He says I should not. The moment I look at the sandy hourglass, it makes me think of the shallows or flats. And what happens then? He imagines his wealthy Andrew docked in sand. Then he imagines that his wealthy ship named Andrew is stuck in sand, whaling her high top lower than her ribs, and seeing the ship upside down to kiss her burial. And finally, of course, that ship would be buried in sand. Should I go to church and see the holy edifice of stone? So he says here, when I go to the church, and I see a building that is made of rocks, it reminds me of the rocks at sea. Right? So the first example was when he cools his soup, he gets he is reminded of winds. When he looks at the sandy hourglass, he is reminded of sand and the shallow water. When he looks at the church building, he is reminded of rocks. Please remember these three things. Then it says here, and see the holy edifice of stone. When he goes to the church, he looks at the holy building made of rocks, and it makes him think straight of dangerous rocks. Right? Which rocks? These rocks. What happens to these rocks? Which touching but my gentle vessel's side. Means when these rocks will touch the gentle sides of my ship, would scatter all her spices on the stream. Then what will happen? The sides of the ship will be torn, and all the spices that are carried in the ship will be scattered all over the water. Enrobe the roaring waters with my silk. Silk means, of course, maybe he is doing business of silk and spices. So he says here, the roaring water will be covered with my silk, with my cloth. And in a word, but even now worth this and now worth nothing. So he says here, in short, I can say that something that was so worthy is now worthless. Shall I have the thought to think on this, and shall I lack the thought that such a thing bechanced would make me sad? So he says here, I can imagine that such a thing can happen. Then of course what will happen is this thought can actually make me feel sad. So it is actually happening to you. Then I can understand that you're sad all because of your ships. See, it is given right in front of it. I want you to mark it. If I can imagine that such a thing can happen, then will I not have the imagination to picture the pain and misery that such a disaster will cause me? So of course he'll cause he can imagine the misery that could actually happen. But tell not me, I know Antonio is sad to think upon his merchandise. So he says here, but please don't tell me, I already know that Antonio is sad because of his merchandise. We'll continue.